Hello guys, welcome back to another A Day in a Life video. And for today's video, I will be showing you how we set up access points at work. I will also be explaining what access points are, what the difference between an access point and a router is, what is power over Ethernet, and all those setup and configuration that you need to do when you are setting up access points in your home or in business. So if this is interesting to you, please keep on watching, and without further ado, let's get started with today's video. Okay, so you might have heard of access points where you're currently working right now, or maybe you haven't, but I can explain what an access point is in simpler terms. So access points basically just allows mobile devices like cell phones, laptops, and tablets to connect to the network or the internet. Because in this day and age, we are using a lot of devices other than desktops and workstations. We are using tablets now at work. We're using cell phones. We're using laptops. We need wireless connectivity now to do most of our jobs and to be productive. And that's where access points comes in. So in a lot of businesses today, access points is needed and being used because it adds wireless capability to a wired network. Previously in our businesses, we only have switches and Ethernet capabilities and just wired capabilities because all we have is desktops in our work. But because we now use our cell phones, laptops, and tablets, we also need wireless connectivity, and access points helps with that issue. So examples of access point devices are Cisco, Meraki, Netgear. So you probably know what an access point is now. So it just gives the mobile devices connectivity to the internet. But isn't that what a router is too? So can we consider an access point a router, or are they similar, and do they have any differences? So to quickly answer that question, an access point is not a router, but a router can be considered an access point. I will explain more on that later on, but now let's just discuss what a router is first. So routers can also connect wireless devices to a wired network just like an access point, but it's so much more. It has more features. It can also connect wired devices to the wired network like the Ethernet. It also has firewall functionality. And the main function of a router is that it's a gateway between the LAN and the internet. So the main difference is that the router can also connect wireless to the wired network, just like an access point. But an access point only has one feature, and that is connecting wireless to the wired network, compared to router that has more features with Ethernet capabilities and firewall functionalities. Okay, so I'm going to show you later on how we are configuring and setting up our access points so that devices could connect to the network. So basically, a lot of access point uses PoE, which means power over Ethernet, and that is a technology where electricity can pass through the Ethernet cable. So you won't need a power cable to power up the devices, just like access points, IP phones, and some cameras. So there are advanced switches out there that can handle power over Ethernet functionalities and capabilities, and just like the Cisco ones. But if you have like smaller switches like the Netgear ones that can't handle PoE on their ports, you can use a PoE injector to have that power over Ethernet capability, and you just need 2 Ethernet cables for that. So an Ethernet cable looks like this. It's that wire with this RJ45 here. So this is what you also need to connect the access point to the switch and enable the power over Ethernet capability for it. You also have to make sure that the Ethernet cable you have is at least Cat5 or higher, because that can handle electricity compared to lower than Cat5. So just make sure that when you're looking for an Ethernet cable to connect an access point or any other devices with PoE, you're using Cat5 or higher. Okay, so I'm now going to show you what we are working on here. So we have to set up an access point in this space here, so people can connect with their phones to the Wi-Fi, because there's currently no Wi-Fi connection in this area. So we are setting up an access point, and that's what we have. That's a Cisco Meraki access point. So we have set up a little switch here. This is a Netgear switch. It's a fast Ethernet switch, and it has 5 ports currently. So this is just a very simple switch, but it doesn't handle PoE or power over Ethernet on each of the ports. So I'll explain later how we're going to set up the access point. So the access point needs to connect to the switch. So this is how the access point works. It needs to connect to a switch or a device that has network or internet. So this is the access point. This is called access point. So as you can see at the bottom, there's different ports here. One is for the Ethernet and one is for power, but we currently don't have any other outlet here, so we are gonna use PoE technology, power over Ethernet, so we can connect this to a switch and it can power up. So we have this baby switch here, that's the Netgear. So this one is called the uplink. This connects you to the main port where you are getting your network connectivity. So that's the uplink to our main port, and these are the ports that we use to give connectivity to other devices that we can put in the switch. So one port here is connected to a computer down there, and one port here is connected to our switch here. So that is where the switch is getting its power and data. And because our switch port is just a baby switch and it can't handle power over Ethernet or power on the ports, we are using this device called a PoE injector. So this helps us get power to devices from the switch if it's not capable of PoE. So this is called a power injector, and it has two ports here. So one port is connected directly to the switch and that gives power to the switch, and one port is connected to the access point and that gives data. Also, if you have an access point like this, you also need to configure this in the portal or however it is set up from the manufacturer. You have to go to a web page probably or a portal from the manufacturer to set up the SSID and the password. So SSID is the name that you can see and shows up when you are looking for Wi-Fi connectivity. And of course, to make it secure, you need to put a password for it. Okay, so this is the area where we are setting up the access point so that it will be easier for people with cell phones to connect to the Wi-Fi instead of relying on the mobile service provider, because inside the studio and the building there's really weak signal. So it really helps to have a stronger signal from the Wi-Fi to get a lot of things done. One of our projects that we are also working on today is deploying mobile devices, new iPhones. So we are just upgrading the phones that they have. That's why we are setting up access points here. So if they are setting up the new phone with the backup, restoring the backup, it'll be easier and faster for the phones to complete the setup.